Hey everyone, so today I wanted to do a video to go through a few things that can ruin your Disney vacation if you let them. There's some advice that I can give just from my experience over the years of all the trips I've been on, things that you perhaps hadn't expected, and if you are not prepared for them can make things difficult or challenging. So we are going to go through those things today. Going on a vacation to Disney World and to Orlando in general, if you're doing the other parks, is a very different kind of vacation from ones that you may have done before. Often on holidays and vacations it's quite a slow pace and you're just going away to relax. That's not really what a Disney trip is all about. There are definitely ways that you can relax, but for the most part, if you're going around theme parks, it's more of an active kind of trip. So let's get right into the first thing that can really cause problems if you are not prepared, which is crowds. And at Disney World, there are definitely busier times of year than others. The busiest times do tend to be spring break. That can vary slightly by state and it can vary each year. So just Google spring break and the year before you are going to make sure you can avoid that if at all possible. The other time of year that is very busy is Easter. Also the school summer holidays, particularly in July. The US schools have their summer break earlier than in the UK. So normally you're okay sort of mid to late August, but in July you will find that it's extremely busy then. And also Christmas and New Year are very, very busy. So those are kind of the key busy times, but there are also other things throughout the year. You get holiday weekends in the US like Labor Day weekend, Columbus Day, all sorts of different things. So you can also Google for US holidays and then that will just give you an indication of whether you might get a crowded weekend or something while you're there. Obviously a weekend is not a big deal though. If you are coming from the UK and going on like a 2-week trip, it's not the end of the world. And other things that can make Disney World very busy are things like Run Disney events. The marathon weekends are now a very, very big thing and people tend to make a trip of it. So the sort of few days before and after can also be very busy, as well as the actual marathon weekend itself. And all of that together, you kind of think, oh my gosh, well, when should I be going then? The best thing to do is look at a crowd calendar. And I've used loads of different ones over the years. And the best one that I have found is touringplans.com. That is my favorite one to use. There is a very small charge for it, but it's extremely minimal and it's for the whole year. I think it's a yearly payment and it's not very much at all, so I would recommend that one. If you would like to look at a free one, I would recommend Undercover Tourist. I will link both of those below. But the crowd calendars really give you an indication of how busy the parks are going to be. They use historical data and they are very accurate in my experience, so definitely check that out before you book anything, just to give you an idea of what it's going to be like. I know for some people you can't avoid certain busy times. If you work in schools and you only have certain times of year when you can go, it might be a case that you have to go at the busy times, but at least if you know and have that expectation in mind, then you're not going to turn up and think, oh my goodness, there are so many people here, because Walt Disney World is a very busy place and yeah, you need to be prepared for that if you're going at a busy time. In terms of how to actually deal with crowds when you are there, so let's say for example you are there at a busy time, and even if you're not, certain things are going to be busy, like fireworks shows for example, particularly if you are in the Magic Kingdom watching Happily Ever After. That is going to be crowded. Everyone kind of stands right in front of the castle and they have extended the kind of hub area over the years to make it more spacious, so that does solve the problem to an extent, but you are going to be kind of in a crowd while you're watching whatever time of year you go. And once the fireworks are finished, people are then going to start moving. So my advice, if you don't want to be stuck in crowds or you find that uncomfortable and get bad anxiety from it, is to watch the fireworks from as far over to the side as you can. Don't stand right in front of the castle, as tempting as that is, because it's a very good view. You are then going to be right in the thick of it when those crowds start moving. So find somewhere off to the side where you can still see, but then when everyone starts to move, when the fireworks are finished, you can just kind of go off to the side, go into a store or something, or just wander around in either Tomorrowland or in Adventureland, which are the ones kind of off to the side, until those crowds have left, gone on the monorails, the ferries, the buses, and you can then exit the park at a more relaxed pace. That's something I like to do. I do not like being in a very, very crowded space. It makes me quite uncomfortable. So that is what I always do when I'm at the fireworks shows. Things like illuminations tend not to be as bad. There's a huge area around the water in the middle of Epcot where people can watch. So you don't tend to get those crowds quite as bad as in the Magic Kingdom. And if you're watching Fantasmic in Hollywood Studios, that actually has seating, so that's a little bit different again, but maybe if you figure out where the exit is before you sit down for the show, you can sit there so that you are kind of first away as soon as the performance has finished. And other things to do to avoid crowds is to get to the park at opening. You can then get quite a few attractions done before it gets really crazy, and then you could come away and go back to your resort, go to the pool, do whatever you want to do. Disney Springs is a nice thing to do as well. On the note of Disney Springs, it can get extremely busy at the weekend because a lot of people who are local will come along to go to restaurants and just shop, do different things. So Saturday night, Friday nights, and to be honest, all day on Fridays and Saturdays are very busy, so perhaps that would be a good time to avoid, and Sundays of course. If you can go like Monday to Thursday, that is a lot better. And if you really want to avoid the crowds and you just want to go shopping, I would recommend going to Disney Springs as soon as it opens, and that will be when the World of Disney and the stores like that are not crowded and you can kind of browse at leisure without having people all around you. So if you do have to go to Disney World at a busy time of year, or you are there for parades and fireworks and things like that, just think about your positioning where you're stood so that you know you're going to be able to move away and not get really stuck in those crowds. The second thing, and this is a big one, is the heat. So we all know that Florida is known as the Sunshine State. It is very hot for the majority of the year. It can be a little bit cooler in December and January, but for the most part, you will get quite hot days the rest of the year. And during the summer, it is very, very warm. And if you're from the UK, we do tend to get warmer weather than we used to, or that I ever remember. But it is very different in Florida. It is a lot hotter than we are used to here in the UK. And depending which country you're coming from, that could be the same situation. And the humidity can be quite brutal. So you just need to do a few things to be prepared. One thing is just expect it to be hot. If you're not expecting it and then you get there and you're walking around thinking, what on earth? Obviously that is going to kind of annoy you a little bit, and you're going to find that quite uncomfortable and difficult. So just have that expectation that it is going to be very hot. There are quite a few different things you can do. Of course, one of the obvious things is to take a break in the middle of the day. I tend to find the sun is at its hottest between maybe like 1 and 4. That's when I always feel that it's hottest. So I will leave the park and go to one of the nearby resorts. If you are at Epcot or Magic Kingdom, that's very easy to do, and then you can just come back to the park later on when the sun has gone down a little bit and it's not so bad. Or you could go back to your hotel, go swimming, take a nap, something like that, and that will definitely improve your mood. If you are trying to walk around the parks all day long from first thing until fireworks, you're there in the hottest part of the day, it just gets too much and it really becomes not enjoyable. So you need to think about the structure of your day, and I would definitely recommend coming away in the middle of the day because it really can be quite hot. So there are quite a few things I found very effective for helping with the heat. If you've been watching for a long time, you're going to be thinking, oh, we've heard this advice so many times, but I keep saying it. We've got a lot of new subscribers on the channel, and a few things that I use are, first of all, a cooling towel. These are really great for keeping you cool. If you wet this and just kind of shake it around, it will go really, really cold. You can then put it around your neck. You can just kind of, you know, use it however you want, but it really does help. You do need to re-wet the towel every now and again, which is easy to do as you're going around. There's water fountains and restrooms and everything everywhere, and if it is still wet and it's kind of gone a bit warm, you can just kind of re-shake it around and it goes cold again. And these are super cheap on Amazon. I will link this one below, or a very close one to it, but there's so many available, so I would definitely recommend picking one of those up before you go. The other thing, which is my absolute essential item for Florida, is this fan. This is by the brand Easyac. You can get it from Amazon. It's only about £11, I think. Again, I will link it below. It comes in a few different colours. You don't have to have a pink one. And these are amazing. They've got 3 settings, so that's the highest one, and it really is a great fan. It's quite powerful, and I would really struggle going around the parks without this fan. It is just I need it. I can't go around the parks without it. It's got a USB to charge it, so when you get back to the room at the end of the night, you can just put it on charge. I do find that it lasts virtually all day, unless you were literally using it all day, but obviously when you go into air conditioning, you turn it off. So I find it lasts the majority of the day. If not, I always have a power bank with me so I can charge it as I go around. But yes, this is essential. It's one of the best things I've ever bought for Florida, so I can highly recommend that. Water is also extremely important. If you get dehydrated, that is certainly going to ruin your day, if not several days. So you can get free iced water from any of the quick service locations, and they are starting to put water bottle refill stations in certain places. There's one in Cosmic Rays, and there is another one somewhere else, I can't think. But basically you can bring a water bottle with you and just keep refilling it. It's really important to drink water, as well as all the nice things that you might be drinking, like soda and slushies and milkshakes and who knows what else. You do need to drink actual water. So if you don't like water and you just find it really hard to drink much of it, I always put a tiny little bit of like juice or squash or like the juice drops in my water, just a really little bit, and I just find it much easier to drink it then. So don't forget about that. And the other thing that can be really useful, which I don't have to hand at the moment, is a light coloured umbrella. Sometimes when you're walking around and there's not much shade, it's easy to say, you know, get out of the sun, take breaks, go into the air conditioning, which you definitely should do all of those things. But if you are there at a very hot time of year, sometimes you do just need to press on if you're going to get anything done. And having a light coloured umbrella you can put up to keep the sun off you when you're walking really makes a huge difference. And these actually attach to the metal spokes in your umbrella, so you can have your fan going, you can have your umbrella up, and it makes a huge difference to walking around in that heat. Yes, you might feel stupid walking around with an umbrella up and a fan attached to it. You will not care. When you're in boiling hot heat in Florida, you won't care, and that is an amazing solution. So those are my top tips for things to bring with you to really help you out. If you're lucky enough to be able to go at any time of year, I tend to find November is very pleasant in terms of weather, and so is kind of March, April time. It's really like the main summer months that get very hot, but it is warm all year round, so I would recommend taking these things with you whatever time of year you're going. The next thing is arguing within your travel party. This is a really difficult one, because whenever you spend 24 hours a day with somebody who you wouldn't normally, because let's face it, usually people are at work, they're at school, whatever you're doing, so suddenly 24 hours together all the time, it's going to happen. People are going to get a little bit crabby and arguments are going to start. That is just natural. But when you throw some of these other things into the mix, like the crowds and the heat, it can get even more likely that that happens, and ending up having a big row, normally which stems from something very small, can spoil everybody's day and just generally really bring down the mood. So some of the tips I've already said actually come into play here. So definitely taking a break is really important. So going back to your resort at some point during the day, you know, if you try and do first thing in the morning until last thing at night in the park, it's a very long time. You will get tired and hot and exhausted. And also just think about who you are traveling with. It might be that if you're traveling with somebody who has any difficulties in terms of mobility, if somebody is older, if you have small children who are walking, but obviously walking really far is going to be difficult for them, just make sure you have the correct expectations of the people you are traveling with, because even if you are full of energy and you can walk miles and miles, that might not be the case for somebody else. And if they're getting dragged along and really struggling, that's when those kind of arguments can start, and it's just not very pleasant for everybody involved. So just think about those things as well. And also, some people just don't like to walk around a park all day long. Some people like to take it easy. Some people like to literally run around seeing how many attractions they can do in one day. So just have those conversations with the people you're going to be traveling with before you go, and find out what everybody's expectation is. Because if you go on one of these trips and you haven't discussed that beforehand, and then you find the person you're traveling with doesn't want to run around doing as many attractions as possible, they want to take breaks and sit down and just do some like eating and drinking, and they're not interested in all that running around, that could cause arguments and tension before you've even started. So just really think about those things, because you don't want to be having arguments It will happen, everybody's human, but there are ways to definitely minimize that happening before you even go by having those conversations. The next one is lines or queues if you're in the UK. This is something that's inevitable when you go to theme parks, and certainly to some of the most popular theme parks in the world, which are the Disney parks. You are going to encounter lines. Disney are very good at theming queuing areas so that there are things to see and do while you're waiting. They also have the fast pass system, which is free for anyone to use who has valid park admission. So anybody can have fast passes. You can have 3 per day, but they do all have to be in the same park. So that will certainly help with queues, because you can then have a few rides that you definitely are going to be able to ride without huge lines. However, some of them are really difficult to get, such as Flight of Passage in Pandora. That can be a really difficult one. Don't forget, if you're staying at Disney, you get 60 days in advance to book those fast passes rather than 30 if you're staying elsewhere in a villa or an off-site hotel. So that definitely gives you an advantage in getting the most popular fast passes. But that's definitely something you should do. Don't ever go to Disney World and not make use of being able to book those 3 fast passes, because everybody can do that. And again, I feel like all of these things come back to expectation to a certain point. So even if you're traveling at what is considered to be an off season or a quiet time of year, certain rides just will always have queues. They've just opened Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Like I was saying, Pandora still experience long lines. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train in the Magic Kingdom is always very busy. And it really doesn't matter what time of year you go, you are probably going to encounter some lines. So you could take some things with you, like Heads Up on your phone. It's an app that you can get. It's a little game. That's a really fun one to play, and quite often other people in line get involved in it. It's the one that used to be that people would stick a post-it note and people had to guess what was written on it. It's the same thing, but it's a version that you can have as an app on your phone. So things like that can pass the time. Just, yeah, looking at the things there are to do. Some of the rides have like little interactive games and stuff like that, but just kind of know in advance that that is something that you may encounter, because if you think you're going to go to the park and just walk onto everything, or everything's going to have a 15-20 minute wait, that's not necessarily the case. You will encounter an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in some situations, and you don't want to be annoyed and you know, let that spoil things for you. So just think about that ahead of time. And on the My Disney Experience app, they do actually have the wait times listed on the map that comes up as soon as you open the app. So in the couple of weeks before your trip, I would just periodically look at that, and then you can see what kind of wait times the parks are experiencing, and then you just have an idea of what you are going to be looking at when you get there. The next thing I think we've kind of covered that I've written down here, but expectations. So we've already talked about that in terms of, you know, thinking about these things before you go, but you do need to make sure that you don't have expectations that are so high of what's going to be going on this trip and everything being perfect that when you get there you're going to feel annoyed that things aren't exactly as you thought they were going to be. There's lots of different factors that can vary. Like I said, people in your party might find things more difficult with the walking around than you had expected. It might be hotter, it might be busier. So just really make sure that you are being realistic before you go, that you know that these things are going to happen and things aren't going to be totally perfect. And just things like the cost. Obviously it is an expensive vacation, and souvenirs and merchandise are expensive. If you haven't been before, that might be something that you're quite surprised by when you get there. In my vlogs, I do tend to look through the stores and try and show prices of things just to give people an idea before they get there. But if you hadn't thought about that and you get there and then realise that everything's 2 or 3 times more expensive than you had expected, both in terms of merchandise and food, that's another thing that could be quite irritating. You may not have saved enough as much as you thought you needed to. So just make sure you research. That's really the key to not having expectations that are unrealistic, is researching everything, and then you know exactly what to expect when you get there. The next one is something that I have learned the hard way, and that is sore feet. If you are not used to walking around all day, which many people aren't, a lot of people have office jobs and things like that, so you're not kind of walking around constantly. When you're in the parks, it is very easy to be doing 20,000 steps a day, in some cases even more, and if you're not used to that, that can be quite a shock. So a few things I would do: one, if you are used to sitting at a desk or something and not doing a lot of walking, is to start doing some walking before your trip to get used to it. So maybe start small and then build up to longer distances, just to get your legs and feet used to that amount of walking. The second thing, which is absolutely crucial, is comfortable shoes. You need to have comfortable shoes, otherwise you are going to get blisters, you are going to get sore feet, and that is not fun. It can easily spoil the next few days of your trip, and in some cases, if you have really hurt your feet in the first couple of days, when you then are going back to the parks every day, they never get a chance to recover and they're just sore for the entire trip. So make sure you wear in any new shoes that you've bought. I normally wear Converse, which I find very comfortable, but do break them in first, or the Havaianas Lunar sandals. I've talked about them loads of times. I will link them below. They are super comfortable for walking around as well, but I've tried so many different shoes over the years and those are my favorites and they're what I find most comfortable. But see what works for you and break them in ahead of time. That is super important as well. But bring blister plasters with you to the parks as well, so that if you start to feel something, you can put a plaster on it before it gets really sore and turns into a full-on blister. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is ride refurbishments and construction. Over the next couple of years, Disney World are going to be experiencing a lot of construction, particularly over at Epcot, and up until they have just opened Galaxy's Edge over in Hollywood Studios, that has been a lot of construction in that park. And if you're not expecting that, it can kind of be a bit of a buzzkill if you walk into a park and there are construction walls everywhere and you were expecting this kind of beautiful aesthetic as you walk in. So just kind of know ahead of time what is going on. There's lots of different sites that keep very up to date with construction. You can follow them on Facebook, things like the Disney Tourist blog. Those are a few different ones that kind of keep up to date with stuff like that, but there's loads out there. But just expect that when you go in. And ride refurbishments, you can also Google, just Google Walt Disney World ride refurbishments and it will come up with a current list. Because if you have rides that you are really, really keen to do and then you turn up and find that they are down for refurbishment, that can be very disappointing, and you don't want that. So just look ahead of time so you know exactly what's going to be closed, and just expect those construction walls that are going to be going on for a little while. And Disney are really good at kind of covering that up, keeping it away from guests, and often they will put up like a tarp over a building that actually is painted to look like the building. So they really do try and disguise it wherever they can, but construction is always happening and all of us want those new attractions and rides and things to see, so it has to happen. Disney is open 365 days a year. They don't have times of year to do this work when guests aren't around. They have to do it while the parks are full of people. In terms of ride closures, they do try to do that at quieter times of year, but in terms of construction, that obviously is just going on all the time, especially on bigger projects, so that will always be there until the projects are completed. And Disney are really good at bringing out new stuff, so once one thing's completed, often something else is then happening. So I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and make sure you are following along over on Facebook and Instagram. I've got a trip coming up really soon. I'm very excited for it and I love sharing all of it with you, my photos, my Instagram stories and everything like that. And then there will be a whole new series of vlogs which I am very, very excited about. I can't wait. So make sure you are subscribed as well. We do also have a little community over on Patreon. I will link that below so you can see what that's all about. Ian and I do a bi-weekly podcast over there and there's all kinds of different things going on, so I will link that below as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day and I will see you in the next one.